Welcome back to another episode of Slamtown. This is episode 3. Of course, I'm Mike Ginn, joined as always by Dan Bakley. Dan, what's up, buddy?
Not too much.
So far, first couple episodes, you've seen us debate a bunch of stuff. First episode, we went in talking about AEW, whether the WWE guys were kind of ruining the product or not, how the long run would play out. Second episode, we jumped into New Japan. We were talking about the G1 Climax. This episode, we're going to turn back the clock a little bit and kind of talk about the path of professional wrestling as far as it concerns the smaller guys, the littler guys. I call this episode the Dynamite Kid Effect because for people of my generation, Dan's slightly younger than me, but maybe his generation a little bit too, there was a group of guys and girls to some effect, but mostly the guys in this case, that kind of copied the generation before them. And in this case, you're talking about 80s wrestlers who came up alongside of some of the giants in professional wrestling, the Hulk Hogans, the Andre the Giants, the Big John Studs. When, we always talk about how Vince loves big guys. Well, back in the 80s, if you weren't gigantic, you probably weren't on TV. And the few exceptions were the tag teams. And most notably, one of the exceptions, obviously you talk about the Hart Foundation, stuff like that, the British Bulldogs. Davey was kind of more the powerhouse, but he was also a younger athletic version at that time. And then there was the Dynamite Kid. For those that really follow the Dynamite Kid, especially in Stampede Wrestling, New Japan Wrestling with the feuds with Tiger Mask and some of the other things he did, you know that he took risks. He took risks that most wrestlers didn't take back then. He was a high flyer. He put his body on the line, so much so that it pretty much ruined his WWF career at the time with a major back injury. Of course, he also had the backseat stuff with the Rougeau brothers and Jacques Rougeau and stuff that led to the whole separation. They went to Japan. Real quick history lesson. They went to Japan. And then he kind of picked up where he left off. He was battling through the back injuries the whole time because he had gotten hurt trying to do so much different moves and trying to always – he was 5'0", 100 and he was trying to be bigger than life. And he was trying to make everybody remember the name Dynamite Kid. And for the most part, he did. I mean, he's a legendary Hall of Fame wrestler. We always remember the Dynamite Kid, not just from the British Bulldogs, but if you're a real wrestling fan, you remember him because he was that guy when you were younger that was doing the stuff that nobody else was doing. And he did that on purpose. But there was a downside to that, Dan. Like, there was a big downside to that. The biggest downside to that was he wrecked his body, right? He passed away at the age of 60. But before that, he had his leg amputated. He was wheelchair bound most of the last decade of his life. He was always angry and bitter. He had a lot of personal demons. And it wasn't until later in his life he kind of maybe, I guess, show remorse might be a little strong, but a little bit of regret of the way he lived before. And he made a lot of amends towards the end of his life, but maybe too little too late, I guess, in some cases. But Dan, that kind of brings back a lot of issues. And the biggest issue is the people that followed in his footsteps, right? The first most notable name when you talk about, and I know you and I were talking off air, the people that have used the famed diving headbutt, right? You mentioned how Harley Race used it before Dynamite. Harley, I don't remember ever, because Harley also had a grounded style as well. I never remember him having the health issues as far as concussions and some of the other stuff. He had back issues in his life, but what wrestler who went through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, like didn't, right? Because they don't have the medical treatment they have now. But Chris Benoit, I mean, that's the name we're not supposed to ever say, right? But we also know famously he was like the poster child for CTE. CTE didn't really exist during Dynamite Kid's era, right? We didn't know if Dynamite had CTE. We know he used steroids. We know he used a number of other things. And admittedly, it's not like it's a secret. You almost wonder, like, did Dynamite Kid have CTE? Did that cause all his personal demons where he was violent towards his wife and his kids? And then we follow forward to some of the other younger generation today, the Darby Allins and other people. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about. My long-winded intro are these guys taking years off their career by trying to do bigger than life spots, if you will? And are they taking years off their lives? Like, are they really doing that? So Dan and I will get into that. Of course, real quick, make sure you check out Fighters First. FightersFirst.shop. Got the brand new Slamtown merch. He's got the rep. He's repping the old school legendary shirts. By the way, leave a note if you want me to bring back some of those. I'm thinking about it. Also got Dan. You know we got that brand new British Bulldog merch too. Speaking of Dynamite Kid, right?
Yep.
Got the officially licensed British Bulldog stuff. So check all that out. Dan, I'm gonna start with you real quick. When you think of Dynamite Kid, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Well, I just want to get this off before I go with that. It was known with the Harley race that he used it, and then he had issues when he was using the diving headbutt. They actually caught it early, the issues that he had, and he stopped using it. And he told wrestlers, please don't use this move. You're going to get hurt doing it. But some of the wrestlers, of course, like Dynamite Kid and Chris Benoit, used it anyway. So he
can't fake it.
Yeah.
You can't fake it. You land with your neck, side of neck, head if you do it right. And there's always a whiplash effect.
And especially guys like Dynamite Kid and Chris Benoit, who used it night in and night out for years at a time. It just was very taxing. And I felt like around that time, just like you said, the heavyweights were the guys to sign because they're big, polarizing, muscular guys that got people in the seats. And I felt like Dynamite Kid was the first guy that really came onto the scene, that he wasn't that big because he was small, and he had to do something to catch the eyes of everybody. So that's why he did all these moves. I think of a guy now that does similar aspects of Dynamite Kid, but tries to be a little bit safer, is Will Ospreay over in New Japan. He does a lot of that crazy stuff, but he's kind of trying to get away from that a little bit now. He still does a little bit of it, but he tries to be more grounded now because he knows he's not going to be able to do that forever. He just did it in the beginning to get noticed, because you got these small guys. They're never going to get noticed unless they're flashy. Whereas if you're big, you're going to be like, damn, this guy's 7 foot tall.
Yeah, Braun Strowman doesn't need to do a top rope like tope.
No. So he's going to get noticed no matter what. He can, just like Hulk Hogan. He only got flashy in New Japan because he kind of had to. Over here, he could do 5-6 moves, and he's the man.
John Cena,
because they have that presentation. As a smaller guy, you got to catch the eye. So jump off the top rope, jump at the guy on the rail, do hurricanranas, do all that crazy stuff that Mexicans do over there, lucha libre style. They kind of did like a mixture of like wrestling and that to catch the eye, and they did a lot of pain on their body because they're trying to just get noticed. They're trying to bring awareness to the smaller guys, and I think it's changed a little bit from then to now, because back then you could use steroids. Guys would just pray through injury, and I think that was a big thing with Dynamite Kid, was him going through injuries, taking steroids to help him out, and then he would just get so hurt and then go through it that he didn't really think about, just like you said, CTE, because it wasn't a thing back in the day. And
that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. I was going to go into the fact that WWE now has their wellness thing, right? And we used to mock it when it first came out. We were like, oh, haha, they suspended Randy Orton for 30 days for, whatever he was doing. Or eventually it cost Jeff Hardy his job in WWE, and he eventually had to go rehabilitate his image and get his shit together and Impact and stuff like that. But with that wellness policy came certain things, right? Like, if you're hurt, we're going to pay you to stay home, and we're going to make sure you get healthy, and we'll make sure you get right. And it kind of makes me think that, and I'm not bashing, I know this is like the second out of 3 episodes, I'm going to say something negative about AEW. I promise you folks at home, I'm a huge AEW fan. But it's almost like, and the reason I'm saying this because AEW has more of the smaller wrestlers. Like they have a lot more of the smaller guys. And they're a very spot-heavy promotion. If you watch a lot of AEW shows, there's not a lot of ring psychology. There's not a lot of storytelling. There's not, a Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns where they're like, Brock's like, what side is Paul Heyman on? There's not a lot of the storytelling. And most of the action in AEW is the storytelling. It's what happens in the ring. Whereas WWE is more soap opera. What happens outside of the ring kind of has an impact whether you watch or not. They approach things differently. And for the diehards, AEW is where it's at because that's the action. The Bryan Danielsons, that's another guy following in the long line of those diving headbutts, right? How many years did Bryan Danielson, a.k.a. Daniel Bryan, miss out of his career because of that diving headbutt and the concussions that he hid from WWE, and eventually they found out and benched him? You look at the wellness policy and how it cost Edge 10 years of his career, but they did it to save his life. Christian's another one. Paige, you want to talk about the women? Another one where they catch these injuries and they're like, we're not gonna be held liable. And of course, this is all post CTE, so they don't want the lawsuits. There's always a business aspect of everything, right? They don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
I told you, I almost like freaked out when I saw Omega versus Danielson, because what did Bryan do? He immediately took these bumps where he's getting dropped right on his head. He's getting kneed into the ropes, so he's whiplashing off the ropes with Kenny Omega's running knees. It's one thing to have to try to steal the show because you're 5'0", 100 and you want the crowd to go home remembering your name. The Dynamite Kids, the Bryan Danielsons. It's another thing of doing it safely. And I think that's the biggest thing that my worry is today, is that nobody's learning from history. All this stuff that WWE's done with this wellness policy is going backwards because AEW doesn't have the same policy that I know of. I'm sure they have good doctors. They have a billionaire running it.
Well, they also pay for what WWE doesn't do. They pay for
rehab,
medical coverage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's why they don't do it, because the wrestlers in AEW have medical coverage and insurance. So they're already set with that. So that's their way of handling it, that they give that to the wrestlers when they get contracts.
Which is fantastic because they're going to need it.
Yeah.
My point is that when you're 5'0", 100, you're going way above and beyond. Whether you're the Young Bucks, who, by the way, have toned it down a great deal since their younger days.
Mm-hmm.
I sat there and watched a match live and in person, them and the Motor City Machine Guns when they were in TNA, when they were called Generation Me. Yeah. And every spot was a high spot. And literally they were bouncing off every rope, flying every which way, risking their lives 110% for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And as a fan, of course, it's the most amazing action you can see. It's like, oh my God, it's like a circus, right? But as a person, I'm sitting there thinking now, years later, why did you have to land on your head? It's like the fact that AEW brought back chair shots to the head. They're bringing back blading and cutting open stuff. And I'm not opposed to all of it, but I think there is definitely something to be said about why and why you're doing this when you don't have to. I think one thing you can talk about WWE being played down and being PG, but their athletes are living a lot longer these days and performing a lot longer. And you go back to this generation that we were talking about. Dan, look at Rey Mysterio Jr. Rey Mysterio used to be one of the greatest high flyers. Yeah, he's one of the greatest high flyers of all time. What happens every time he has a match nowadays?
He gets hurt.
His body is broken. And he's one of the greatest performers of all time. But every time he steps in the ring now, he gets hurt. What
You
happens
can
to
argue.
Samoa Joe every time he wrestles?
You can argue that
Concussion.
You can argue that Rey Mysterio was probably the first small guy that they pushed at WrestleMania and put the title on him right after everything with that Eddie Guerrero. They pushed him. I think he was the second person to go from number one in the Rumble and win it. It was one or two.
He's the only one I think to go coast to coast, but Ric Flair went from like number 2 or whatever to.
And then he did that, and then he goes to WrestleMania and wins, and he's probably one of the smallest guys there, and that's at that
definitely
point
the smallest ever world champion.
Yeah, and that was unheard of at that time in WWE, and I think WWE has kind of regressed because they've seen what AEW has done. And that's why I think the whole NXT thing is getting reshuffled, rebranded to where they want to use it more developmental. Now you're seeing them break out all these big guys now, and guys like, even though Ciampa's the world champ, I feel like there's uncertainty.
There's another guy. How many times has he risked his health coming off the top of the cage, Hell in a Cell, him and Adam Cole? Like, how many times has he like been dropped on the back of his head, missed how much time? Johnny Gargano. There's just more names you keep throwing to the fire.
Adam Cole went over to AEW because he felt like he wasn't going to get used in WWE because of this whole reshuffle. Because in his mind, Vince McMahon sees the big guys as the attractions. And a lot of the guys that were small that got called up had just been jobbers or mid-card guys at best. And I feel like they go over to AEW because they feel like they're getting used. And I think a big thing with that, like, say you mentioned the Young Bucks back in Impact. A lot of these guys are doing it nowadays because they want to get that notoriety, because you got the indies now where you can go to the indies and your goal is to get to the big leagues, like WWE, of course.
Goal is to get paid.
Yeah, now AEW.
You can lie all you want and say you're doing it for the art of it, but the goal is to get paid and have a comfortable career.
And you can get paid doing just indies now. A lot has changed, but the goal is always to get to WWE or AEW. And how do you do that? You get noticed. And how do you get noticed? By doing something crazy, doing something polarizing that nowadays with YouTube and Twitter and everything, people can take a video of you doing something crazy, and it goes all over social media now. So you're seeing a lot of that now. You see on AEW, you mentioned it, Darby Allin doing all those crazy.
And it's not new either.
Yeah.
You got people like CM Punk that made their name on backyard wrestling.
Yeah.
That's how CM Punk got started, backyard wrestling. Like, and you do something crazy, it gets caught fire, viral, early days of the internet, whatever. Next thing you know, you're wrestling in a real ring, and then you're wrestling on the biggest promotions on the planet.
Yeah, and you got a Darby who does the coffin drop and all these crazy stunts. He's kind
of down the stairs.
He still does those, but they're kind of, I think they're starting to manage him a little bit better. He still does the coffin drop, but everything else, the guys that they're putting him with now, the past couple months, are guys that work in the ring that do less of that. Like he did CM Punk, he did that. He's now working into a program with MJF, or he just did that. It's guys that are well grounded that don't do these high spots at this time, where like he can still do it, but he's getting managed around the ring now to slow the pace down. And I think they're trying to like do that so like he has a little bit longer career, because he had, with the type of wrestler he is, he's
the poster child of what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. He needed to do these to get noticed and make it to AEW, and now they're trying to work with him to make him last longer. And I think that's a good move. And they're trying to mix and match both styles, like the slower style and then his hardcore style.
Yeah, I think it really goes to the longevity of this. And this is my concern. You're not just taking years off your career trying to have this huge spot. You may be taking years off your life. Yeah. And is it worth it? That's really the question of what we're talking about right now. Is it worth it? Because Dynamite Kid, I think he would tell you towards the end of his career it wasn't worth it. Chris Benoit, if he was still here, which, you know, everything that happened with the murder and suicide and everything, I wonder what he would say, because he was all in. He was all in with everything.
Yeah.
Eddie Guerrero regretted some of his more risky stuff when he was younger. Rey Mysterio has publicly said on different shows when he was on like MLW radio and stuff like that a few years back, like he had wished he'd kind of like maybe not done some of the stuff. But even today, he does that slide under the ropes where he does the splash to the outside. That's one wrong move away from like hitting your head into like the barricade or something like crazy.
Chris Jericho was one of the guys that went with them to New Japan and Mexico and everything, and he kind of adapted a new style halfway through his career, so he didn't have all those issues later on. Like
the most you ever see him do is like the outside of the ropes thing, where he puts his hands out forward.
Yeah. And then one thing that he's done to kind of help him is DDP yoga. He said that he's had back issues, and that's been one of the things that has helped him a lot.
And he puts the big mat out when he falls off the cage.
Yeah.
We kid, Chris. Don't get mad. We love you.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you're a Darby Allin, if you are some of these younger kids, the Jungle Boys, Marco Stunt, like some of these really small people doing these crazy stunts to get the audience talking about you. Leo Rush, look how many injuries Leo Rush has had over his short life and career. He's
retired for 2 months. Yeah.
What did you say?
I said he retired for 2 months.
Yeah, he's retired a few times, and he's in his mid-20s. He's not old.
Yeah.
Leo Rush is another example. You look at some of these Japanese careers that get cut short because of the physical strong style they do when they try to mix in high flying. As a fan, of course, I want everybody flying around everywhere. It's great to watch on TV. It's great to see in person. But I can't help to think, like what they're doing with Darby Allin the last few months is probably the smartest thing in the world. Like when he took that big bump when he went down the stairs with Ethan in the sky, he like really did get roughed up doing that.
Yeah.
And I think Tony Khan sat there and said, we got money invested in you now. We can do a spot once in a while, but let's slow down. You look at the Young Bucks. They don't go flying over the ropes all the time anymore. Same thing with Chris Jericho over the last 20 years of his career. All the high-flying stuff he does, if you notice, it's on the inside of the ring. The lion salt, all that stuff coming off the top rope, any of that stuff is on the inside of the ring where you have the mat to catch you, not that hard concrete floor. I look at Orange Cassidy, another smaller guy who, while he does a spot once in a while, especially that tope over the top rope, most of his stuff is in the ring. You look at some of the psychology that gets with some of these top stars. You know, MJF said the 4 pillars, right? Sammy Guevara, Darby, him, Orange Cassidy, just to name a few. And Tony obviously expanded to say a bunch more. The one thing they all kind of have in common over the last few months is a lot of what they do. Sammy's been the one taking the risks. And I worry about Sammy's career because jumping from the ring into like the stands and that RVD type style, RVD would tell you himself, it was great at the time. It doesn't feel so good now. ECW,
I agree with
that whole style. Those guys' careers did not last long.
I agree with that, but I think one thing that he does have in his side pocket is the fact that he has Chris Jericho there, give them input, and he's not afraid. And he's not afraid to talk to him and get advice. And he has said that slowed down. He has said that Chris Jericho has told him to slow down, and then he tells him when he needs to like cut back on certain things.
It's almost like he's forcing himself too. Like if you saw like his last match with Miro, he does some spots. Like he's so used to going 110 miles an hour. Like I remember when I first saw him and Cody Rhodes in the very first Dynamite, and he like spot. Compared to now, he's like, you can tell he still wants to go fast, but he's like purposely trying to slow down a spot to the point where it's almost like noticeable. Like it's not like you notice he's trying to slow down.
And then you have to remember that he had this big year gap where he didn't wrestle a singles match. He did just inner circle matches in that year. I think it was like 3 matches that he did total, and they were either tag team matches or like the group matches before he got this push now where he's doing all these singles matches by himself now. So I feel like he's trying to do it to a point where he's trying to mix it up and go, okay, I know I get this run right now. I might not have this for a while again, so let me take advantage of it. Because I had a whole year where I didn't really do that much singles wise.
And it's not just them too. Like, I know we're looking at the little guys because that's the purpose of this show, like the Dynamite Kid Effect, how the little guys are taking years off their lives and off their career trying to do these high spots. But it's some of the big guys too. Like, if the big guys are getting hurt like this, imagine what the little guys are going through. Because you just mentioned Edge, Christian, Matt and Jeff Hardy, the Dudley Boys, the whole TLC matches they used to do.
Yeah.
Where are any of those guys wrestling anymore? Edge just came back from like 10 years off. Christian just came back from like 7 years off. Matt Hardy against Sammy had that massive concussion because he's still taking risks like that. Jeff has toned down his style a lot. You don't see him flying all over the place like he used to. Obviously, Bubba and Devon are pretty much kind of retired at this point.
Once a producer in WWE, and then Bori.
Yeah, and Devon wasn't ready to hang him up either. But Vince will protect his brand, and he's going to protect his liability more than anything. And if he thinks you're a risk, he's not going to put you out there unless he can make a shit ton of money. Then it's whatever.
Yeah.
But like, he cuts people nowadays when you're like, wait, what? Because he knows the business and the financial side of things. Tony, I think, is still learning that. I think he's picking up on it faster and faster. But I think he's still learning that, okay, Darby, you can do this spot, but let's make it like once for like the pay-per-view matches. Let's not do it every match. And I think that's a big difference.
Well, I also think that Vince, he's not in that same mindset. He's not focused on just wrestling. He's focused on entertainment. Like he spread himself to different avenues. WWE's so established for like the last 30, 40, 50 years that he's spread himself to like movies, TV, all these reality shows that he's not focused on just the wrestling. AEW's just wrestling. So it's like, to me, it's like a different aspect for each guy. Like Vince isn't just plugged into the wrestling side anymore. He has guys that he kind of manages that worry about each show now, and then he just kind of oversees it. Whereas with the AEW, Tony Khan, they're in year 2, so they're still growing. They're doing great, but they're still growing. They got a lot of things they got to learn with growing. And I think he's made decisions like, okay, now I'm the guy fully in charge, whereas he had EVPs and they took that away from him. And he's learning on the go, and I think he's done a great job with how short amount of time that they've been a company. But I think he's going to learn more and more as they go on, and then you're going to see the different subtle differences as they go. But I think back to the first thing you like the topic of this episode is it worth it? It's kind of a yes, and for me it's kind of a yes and a no, because it's worth it because you're going to get noticed if you're good enough, because the whole point of doing this, if your mindset is right, is to make it to the big leagues or make money. And the only way you get that is if you get noticed by doing something. Somebody's going to see your match and they're going to be like, oh, good match. But if you make that great highlight video and it gets all these views, the promoter's going to be like, oh, this guy got a lot of views because he did this crazy stunt, or he's had all these matches. They're going to be more inclined to sign you over a guy that has a great match, but no one knows about it because there wasn't any videos on it. But then at the same time, it's like it also isn't worth it because you might not have a long career, because you might take a lot of chances or big stunts and it could have a wear and tear on your body. But then you might not get noticed and you might just be an indie wrestler. So it's like, are you content with making, say, $500,000 a year being an indie star because now you can make good money off of just being an indie star? Or do you want to make $5-10 million being in WWE or AEW, taking those risks? So it's an answer of which do you want to do? And I think that's where falls with me with that answer.
I'll wrap this up and say one example, well, one family example, kind of basically, of where I worry about this going in the long run. I look at the Hardys. I look at them because they were kind of like Dynamite Kid, right? Like when the Hardy Boys came on the scene, there was so many giant tag teams in the wrestling. You still had, tag teams like the Road Warriors and stuff like that, but you also had, at the time Vince was putting together a lot of the tag teams like Stone Cold and The Rock would be together for a match. Shawn Michaels would be together with somebody, or you'd have like the Nation of Domination, or you'd have like big wrestlers like Crush and Bryan Adams and stuff like that. So the Hardys were always the small guys. And even later, you look how much bigger actually Edge and them are compared to the Hardys, right? I look at ECW. I look at that too, which is another great example of how many ECW wrestlers, A, are no longer with us, or B, their way of life. You look at a Sabu. Sabu can barely walk. Rob Van Dam took better care of himself because of his health and his wellness and his fitness routines. Maybe even the marijuana use or whatever you want. But Rob Van Dam was always a very fitness freak. So he took great care of the stretching, gave him a lot more longevity.
Yeah. And Taz was never a guy that did that style. He's more so stay in the ring, do a lot of suplexes. And he did take a little bit of damage, but you see he looks he's a big guy now, but he looks fine. He looks like he doesn't look like he's
look at Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle done like all those moonsaults and stuff Kurt Angle was doing. Took years off his career. But go back to the Hardys. Shannon, Gregory Helms.
Yeah.
Where are their careers now? Shane Helms' career got cut way short because of all the injuries. He still makes a spot appearance here and there, almost like a gimmick. But his back and his neck are shot. Shannon, you don't see wrestle anymore. All those guys from the Omega group in North Carolina that all started, you don't see a lot of them anymore. And obviously they're in their later 40s now. It's a little different, but you haven't seen them for years. It's not just yesterday. Matt Hardy taking that risk, taking that bump in that match with Sammy, had his wife and everybody freaked out because Matt was completely out of it when he took that bump. And he's a 47-year-old man now. He doesn't need to be taking those bumps, especially when you're established. Like this Big Money Matt character, the Delete character he had in Impact, like he's found ways to get himself over despite everything throughout his career.
He's been more of a, I wouldn't say a manager, but he's more like a manager managing these guys.
He's transitioned at this point in his career.
And then he's wrestled kind of part-time now. And it's worked because he's still relevant and still there.
But if you look at him and Jeff, they took years off.
Yeah.
Like you didn't see either one of them wrestle for a few years at one point because they were recovering from different stuff. At one point, Matt had to like push his intestines back in his stomach because he had staples to hold his belly together.
Yeah.
Jeff would take these risks to where he'd break his neck, not just in the ring. You're talking about on motorcycles and dirt bikes and stuff outside of the ring, which hurt his career. And these are the way these people live. Darby Allin does this stuff now with skateboarding and everything else. And at the end of the day, I hope I see a Matt Hardy alive at the age of 70. I hope I see a Darby Allin alive and kicking at the age of 70. And we, as human beings, hope to live till we're 100. I hope these guys live to 60, 70 years old.
And one thing I just thought of is if you look at New Japan back like 20 years ago, it was a whole bunch of high flyers. And I think they kind of caught everything early because what have you seen in the past 20 years from New Japan that they started? They started doing those dojos in Japan and US where they have a certain style. And when they bring a guy in through the dojo, they do that. They're young boys for like 2 years where they learn the New Japan way. And then you see them graduate and become full-time wrestlers there. And a lot of the heavyweights there don't even touch the top rope. I think Ospreay is like the exception, and he stopped doing it once he became a heavyweight. You don't really see him go on the top rope anymore. You see the art of them just wrestling in the ring and use the ring as
the art
their
of psychology.
other psychology. And I think they caught that early when they started doing that. Like they have exceptions with the junior heavyweights and then guys that they bring in and sign because they're already established somewhere else. But for the most part, majority of their guys are set in the New Japan way, and it's worked for them for over 20 years. And that's why they've had a kind of a set thing over there where it's not going to bend or break. And I think that's why they they're starting to like push it over here now with the US dojo being over like I think 5 years old. It's not that old, but they pushed it over here to try and get a base set over here and push it here as well because they know that there's a market here that they can do it, and eventually it's going to be big over here. But I've seen that, and I've been like, they're catching this early. They know that they have to do this because they want to milk their assets for what they're worth. They're getting these guys, they're paying them. They're like, if we could get this guy and he wrestles for 15, 20 years, we're made. We're going to get the most out of the investment. Whereas a guy that had like Jeff Hardy, not saying him, just saying the name, who's a high flyer and gets hurt all the time, you might pay him like $5 million a year for 10 years. If he only wrestles for 5 years because he's hurt half the time, he was great for those 5 years, but you're losing out on the investment because you're only getting half of the investment there because of injury. Yeah. And I think that's a thing to think of and to think of the future. And I think
I even think of Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels today has to do. He put a video online not too long ago where he's like his whole stretching routine every morning is like a 5-10 minute stretching routine every day. Like he has to, or he can't move.
Yep.
And he never put his head at risk, but he put his body at risk. And I'll finish it with this. I want to leave it up to you guys. Leave a comment. Tell us what you think about everything. I'll wrap it up with this. Every generation we see this. We saw it with Dynamite Kid. He got hurt. People didn't do it for a few years. We saw it with Chris Benoit. He did what he did, snapped, CTE became a thing. We didn't see it for a few years. Now this generation is not just one guy. It's not just a Darby Allin. It's an entire generation of high spots. And I don't want to sound like the old guy in the room. I just don't want to see these guys cutting their lives short just to make us happy. I think there's ways to do these high spots, and I think there's ways to do them a little safer than going head first, especially Bryan Danielson, who, Bryan, you already missed years of your career. So leave a comment below. Let us know what you think of the whole situation. Let us know what you think of the comments. Like and subscribe. And that's it for Slamtown this week. We want to know what you think. Let's go ahead and start this conversation up. Is the Dynamite Kid Effect still a thing in 2021? I think it is. Dan, yes, no?
It's a little bit of both. I think it's a complicated.
You're always such a politician. All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Slamtown. We will see you back next week. Coming back with more great topics. If you have any ideas for topics, leave a comment. And, of course, head over to fightersfirst.shop. Shop the merch. The Slamtown merch is in the picture right below us. And, of course, we got the Davey Boy Smith British Bulldog collection riding along with this whole Dynamite Kid thing we're talking about. Check out the British Bulldog collection and copy yourself a shirt there, too. For Dan Bakley, I'm Mike Ginn. We'll see you next week.